Okay, I'm gonna try to help a beginner mandolin player out here. Someone who wants to learn a bluegrass style. So from the beginning, when you're wanting to learn bluegrass style, learn the full chords where you're covering every string. If you learn this right off from the beginning, even though it's a stretch and your fingers feel stretched at first, they will eventually be able to, the muscles will stretch further and you will be able to reach the chords. A lot of people say, I can't stretch my fingers like that. But you just have to keep working at it, because I've seen even young kids be able to do it with small hands. So even if your hands are small, you can do it. The full chords in a bluegrass style are, we're going to do G, C, and D first. So your pointer finger, index finger, goes on the 2nd fret of your A string. Your middle finger goes on the 3rd fret of your E string. Your ring finger goes on the 5th fret of the D string. And then here's where the big stretch is. The pinky gets clear up here on the 7th fret of your G string. And if you just kind of rotate your hand around and put your thumb kind of up here on the top like this, you can get that chord. It's a stretch for me too, but you can get that percussive sound that you can chop with. Like that. You're giving a chopping sound to it, but it's kind of taking the place of a snare drum in a regular band, that chopping sound on your mandolin. You're pushing the strings down and then releasing them as it starts to ring. Okay, so there's the G chord. Now, the chords that relate to the key of G are G, C, and D. So, in order to get to a C chord, you simply move all your fingers up to the middle sets of strings in the same position. So now, your first finger is on the 2nd fret of the D string. Your middle finger is on the 3rd fret of the A string. And your ring finger is on the 5th fret of the G string. And obviously there is no more strings, so you can't put your pinky down. So you just have these 3 fingers down. So now when you're chopping the chord, you're going to make sure you do not ring this bottom string. Just hitting those lower sets of strings, the lower 3 sets. Okay, so if that's a C chord, if you slide your hands up 2 frets, it becomes a G chord. I mean a D chord, excuse me, a D chord. The 3 chords in the key of G are G, C, and D. So here's G, that's the biggest stretch. C, the middle string's in the same position though. Slide up 2 frets. There's your D. So you can go, well, be the path on that old mountainside, and I wandered when I was a lad. G, C, D. Wandered along to the place I called home, those Blue Ridge hills so far away. And one thing that's really cool to take notice of in these chords, your ring finger and your middle finger will always be the root notes. So the ring finger on the 5th fret in the G chord is a G note. The middle finger on the 3rd fret of your E string is also a G note. You're going to always want to, when you're taking a lead in a song, you're always going to want to end on the note of your root key you're in. So if you're in the key of G, you want to end on a G note, whether it be this G note or this G note, or your open string G. But always resolve every break you take to that root note if you're in the key of G. So now let's see if that works for C. When we go to those middle strings, keeping the same position with our fingers, suddenly the same thing. This middle finger is a C note, the ring finger is a C note. When we slide up two frets and make it a D chord, the middle finger is a D note, the ring finger is a D note. So those are interesting things to notice when you're taking a lead, because you can put a lot of things in there in your song, and if you end on the root note of your song, well, I should go to G because we'd be in the key of G. So if you end on the root note of your song, that takes away a lot of pressure for sounding bad when you're trying to just be a beginner and trying to figure out a break. The other important thing to know is your scale pattern. In the key of G, your scale pattern would be an open G string, 2nd fret on G, 4th fret on G, 5th fret on G, open D string, 2nd fret on D string, 4th fret on D string, 5th fret on D string, open A string, 2nd fret on A, 3rd fret on A. Now this is where the pattern changed a little bit. Before, you were spaced on these two strings. When you got to your A string, you need to play your middle finger close to your first finger. Then the ring finger is on the 5th fret. This is on A string. The E string is open E is good, 2nd fret on E, 3rd fret on E, and 5th fret on E. So any of those notes will work and fit in a song that you're playing out of the key of G. That is the G scale. So the G scale is open G, space between fingers here on your G string, D string, space between fingers again, between 1st and 2nd finger. Now your A string open. Now the 1st and 2nd finger are close. Open E string. 1st and 2nd fingers are close again. But of course you're going to resolve your song onto either that G or that G if you're in the key of G, playing in the key of G. Okay? And that, when you're taking a lead or trying to learn how to take leads in a group, starting on that note and ending on that note. If you're in the key of G, start on a G note, end on a G note. And knowing that little trick helps a lot. In between there, trying to find your leads, play any of those notes that are in the pattern, scale pattern that I just showed you. That will help you to not make your notes sound sour in your lead that you're trying to grab. So remembering those little tricks can really help a person. That's how, when I was first learning, how I would figure out what key a person was playing in. Whatever their ending note was in the song, that's the key they were in. So if somebody says to me, well, can you play You Are My Sunshine in the key of G? I would play through it, and if my last note was a G, for what I had figured out on my break, I knew I was in the key of G. If my last note ended up being a D or something for the lead I was finding, then I knew, oh, wait a minute, I'm playing that in the key of D. I'm not playing that in G. You can tell what key it is just by your last note, what the last note of your break is. And so in your jam circle, when someone calls something in the key of G and you're not sure where to take a break, just start on your G note for your first note trying to take the break. Play notes that are within that scale pattern that I just showed you. And then at the end of the break, make sure that you end on a G note also. And that will make it sound, that will give you a start for being able to kind of try to find some breaks in the songs. Get used to playing these stretched out chords. G, same configuration, but on the middle string, C, slide up to D. And just practice stretching that finger no matter how hard it is. If you practice it after about 3 days, I can guarantee you, you'll be able to do it. So that's just some tips for a beginner mandolin player that's trying to take a lead in a song and confused as to where to go. I can remember when I was first learning how much trouble I had that way, and I didn't know this rule. I figured this out on my own, but if I would have known this or had somebody tell me this, it surely would have made it a lot easier to try and find a melody to something trying to take a lead. So as you're practicing at home, and this is of course very beginner basic mandolin, but I know there's a lot of beginner players out there that are confused, as I was back in the day, as to where to find a lead. So start on your root note, end on your root note, play notes in between that are in that scale pattern, and you'll be able to find leads to songs.